Granted, you can't see my face too well, but that's because I wanted some light so you can see some things. Now, one of the things that I look at when approaching a model, especially a 3D printed model, is texture. And I let the texture kind of guide what I do. Everything when I start, I always prime black, right? So here's my black prime, okay? It's always prime black. That's just what I found the best for when approaching things. Now, you've got two different versions here. For instance, I've got this particular roof as an example, and you'll note that you can clearly see that I have not dry brushed this uniformly. And I haven't dry brushed it uniformly quite on purpose because of the fact that when I look at it, it gives it depth and I have some sort of idea of weathering where that's concerned, okay? And I kind of let the model guide my paint colors. In this particular case, it is a more of a darker red. All I did was mix a red and a black. There's about 5 colors that I used in these different things. Now, if I turn it over, the red for the brick here is a slightly different shade than this, and that's perfectly fine. You'll notice that I didn't quite get it all dry brushed all the way to the corner, and that's okay because that gives a different layer of color. And so the first time I do this, I might do it a very dark red. And then I might highlight it again. But when I highlight it, it's usually about 3 shades. When I do my last shade, I sporadically highlight it to give it a various ununiform look. I mean, you can clearly see when you look at it, I highlighted this more than I did that part right there, more than I did, it's got to reverse this part over here. But when looked at from afar, it gives a very natural, for lack of a better term, very natural color. I almost said roof, right? So, and you can clearly see as I look at this, how it's done that way. Now, as I look at the body, right, I can clearly see texturing in those bricks. Now, the way I did those bricks is it's a mix of black and white to start with, very darker gray. And then I slowly highlighted it up to about 3 colors. And once again, that third color doesn't have to be uniform, so you get a natural change in coloration as you go through. Now my windows, they're outdone in a brown. And you'll look right here, let me explain how I do my windows real quick. Just a regular shade of blue, right? And then I actually use an Army Painter strong color, and I wash the blue so it kind of tints a little bit. Then I actually use 2 little slits of white, right, to actually give it the glare, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. Well, there's a natural glare in this anyway because I have to, but you can see the 2 little bits of white on there. And then all I do after that is I go over, and it doesn't have to be great, as I go over the outline of the shade of the shutters and the window itself. And it doesn't have to be shaded. I just color it to give it a color differentiation. These different bricks right here, it's just a lighter color I put on there. That's it. And then when I look at these bricks right here, right? Oh, this one right here. Okay. That is a mix of black and red, right? To give it a brick-like color. And then I'm just having, I'm not even making, I can't even say, like, if I look really close at the door, I can't even say that I've dry brushed it 100%. I leave the elements there to give it a depth, and you can really see the window there. And it's the same with the shades, or excuse me, the shutters on the window itself. So it was originally painted black, and then dry brushed brown, put in the blue, washed the blue, and then gone over it again to give it a second highlight. It's very simple, but I found it to be incredibly effective, especially on the tabletop when you put it together. Okay. Now, that has texture. Texture is easy, right? Letting the texture of the model guide how it's painted, very, very easy. Okay. Now, what's not easy is when your model has no texture at all. Okay? Now, if you look, this was painted a solid black to begin with. This was solid black primed. Then I went over it with a little darker green. And then I slowly highlighted it up, but you can clearly see the color differentiation. So on my last pass, I never try to get it all. I try to give it a different shade, so I'm giving it the impression of texture and or depth. So I'm actually painting that on, if that makes sense. And then, for instance, the weathering patterns, all that is just black dry brush to a very, very light degree. But I do not try to put paint on there uniformly, and I don't know if that's a thing, because in when I'm painting my miniatures, I try to do that. Here I do not. Okay, and I can even, and it's the same effect on the windows. The blue windows with the two bits of white to make it shiny. And I know glare is kind of bad. I'm trying to rotate it around. But even like the brick here, okay, that is just the red and black mixed to make the brick color. I did steel, and then I used the same shade to age it, so that I use Army Painter Strong. You can use something different to kind of age it. But these are more difficult when they don't have a texture, and I do my very best to make sure. Like, for instance, right here, I can tell that I didn't paint it as much. That was only, I think, one shade. So I might dry brush that again later, but you can clearly see after one run through, it's not good enough. You're going to have to do it a few times. I found that 3 consecutively lighter, dry brushed colors usually seem to be the best. Okay. Now let's move on to the one you really asked me about. You really asked me about the church. Now the church was kind of a challenge, but it worked out pretty good. So I'm going to go like this. Now, very first thing is you'll notice is the foundation, right? That foundation is basically a gray, a very, very dark gray with a very, very light gray, and then a third lighter color, right? Now, if you look at the brown part of the church, right? So if I'm looking here, you'll notice that I didn't dry brush it all the way over. I couldn't get all the parts, and it gives it a weathered appearance. Additionally, where there's holes, I took a light black, right? A kind of a washed out black, put it on here, and then pulled it down to give it a weathered appearance. But if I had too much pigmentation, oh, you can really see that one right there, right? If I have too much pigmentation on it, I'll actually drag it down with my finger or wipe it off with my finger, right? And then you'll notice that this is gray, but it's not a solid I painted that on gray. I'm actually using various levels of dry brushing to get this effect. So each particular place where you see it's almost 3 or 4 colors, that means I've dry brushed it consistently lighter. And then if you look right there, as you really get to see the lighter shades, that's because I actually highlighted a gray in there, right? So the gray that I used on the foundation, I went over this a little bit at the very end to give it a lighter color. You can really see it over there, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be enough to give it some contrast as you go through, and for me, it looks great on the tabletop. And then on the inside, all I did was I probably put 1 or 2 shades of color in there just to make sure it's not totally black, and it gives the impression of a bombed out inside of the building. And then as I painted some other stuff, I might go in here because I can't get all the way in the inside anyway, so I don't necessarily even try too hard. And then this right here, once again, that's the black painted around the outside. And if you look right up here, you'll see that I have a black and I also have the lighter color mixed to give it a different shading. Because all of this to me is about trying to make the different colors pop, and I'm giving it a texture. Because there really was no texture on this. This was all flat. So I just used consecutive layers of dry brushing to kind of bring out different colors as it goes through. And see, like over here, this is a texture. It clearly connects to the foundation. I could have painted that the same foundational color, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted there to be a definite like movement between this part of the church and the foundation itself, so you can clearly see there's a difference there. And of course, then I dry brushed the lighter colors as I went through. And I'm okay if a little bit of the black shows through, because by the time I get 3 colors in there, very little of that black shows through. There's more of my weathering, because it's naturally a place where the water would accumulate and then come downwards. And then I even put that on the foundation right here. Sorry, right here. Okay. So this is on a tabletop, it looks wonderful. I mean, I think it does. But part of the reason it does is because of the fact that you have the different colors mixing together, and you're not 100% like, I don't know, when we're doing the colors for the figures, we want to make absolutely sure it's a solid color. But here, I had to move away from the idea of the solid color because of the fact that it didn't work for terrain, right? It just simply did not work. So I had to change the way I paint, and this is more continual dry brushing to get these effects. You know, if I go back to this one, right? I don't like that glare on it. Let me just put it. If I go back to this one, I can definitely see, so it was the original darker green, and then the lighter green, and then full on lighter, but when I put on my last coat, it was not uniform. It gives the impression of it gives the impression of texture in sections that don't have any texture. I mean, both of these were flat, no textured sides, and I had to make that work. Now, colors. So for both of those models, I mean, aside from the green, naturally use green. So there's my brick red. You'll notice it's way lighter. It's way lighter than in color. And there's the black. There's a white. There's my white. And I use a brown. And maybe a light gray from another level. But really, it's between 4 and 5 colors. Right? So that's 70 cents a bottle. That's, geez, $3.50, something like that, and they will last forever. They don't keep very well. They don't mix very well all the time, or they don't mix very well with water, but they still do really well for dry brushing and putting the basic colors and textures down. So what I'm now going to do, this is kind of a general introduction video to give you an idea of kind of some thoughts behind it. And I do think a lot about what colors I'm going to put down before I sit down, so I have a general idea of how it's going to look. And then I make some modifications as I go along. What I'm going to do in the next video is I'm going to actually paint some Dark Age huts, right? So they are... Basically, I'm going to paint these 3 huts. I'm going to take them from nothing all the way up to maybe, hopefully, finished. So it should be interesting, and I'll let you know how that looks in the long run. Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.